Hello and welcome to Current Issues with me, Tarun. The topic that we are taking up today deals with clean energy cess. Should clean energy cess that is levied on coal be shared with the states? This demand comes from Odisha. A member of parliament from the ruling BJD there also raised it in parliament when he demanded that 60% coal energy cess or the clean energy cess collected on coal should be shared with the state governments. Other states also have been coming up with the same demand. So we first discuss whether clean energy cess be shared with the states, and then whether what kind of benefit do this kind of cess incur to the country or the industry. And to discuss this topic today, with me present is Alok Parthi. He is former coal secretary, currently sits as chairman on the expert appraisal committee of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. Also we have got B. Akla. He is former chairman of Central Coalfields Limited. He also was the chairman of CMPDI, someone who comes with an experience of more than 5 decades in the coal sector. I first start with my opening comments. I am going to call our former coal secretary Alok Parthi. Mr. Parthi, how would you see the clean energy cess? It was recently doubled, and the state's demand that it should be shared with them.
In the beginning, I would say there is an objective or a principle behind having clean energy cess. The idea is that carbon or coal, when it is burnt, it creates carbon dioxide, and to be able to take measures to mitigate the effects of emission of carbon dioxide, the idea was to create a fund, and that fund could be used for various activities which were related to the mitigation issue. The amount that is now being levied is 400 rupees a ton. It started with 100 at one time, then it was doubled, then it is now 400. The amounts that are collected, if you go by simple figures, are huge. 650 million tons being produced in this country of coal.
Yes.
Means that something like 26,000 crores is being collected.
26,000 crores
per annum is being collected as this cess.
Okay.
The purpose, what has been notified or been explained by the government, is to use this cess in a way that it can help to mitigate certain disadvantages are there because of carbon dioxide emissions. And this really meant that we move into areas where we can use maybe say solar and renewable energy. We can use it for doing research to find more efficient ways of using coal, so that the same amount of coal can give you a good energy and less emissions.
So I take that as your opening comment.
This is yes.
I'm going to be Akla. I'm going to ask him, as Mr. Parthi said, 26,000 crores. That's the extent of cess that is collected. Do you see that being deployed in the ways that it should be, or do you think now is a collection exercise, the deployment will happen sometime later?
See, as the very name indicates, it is clean energy cess.
Yes.
It is meant for going ahead with the clean energy processes. So that means that the energy generated, the means of generating energy in the country is not so very clean, and the emissions are too high, and that is the reason why the very amount, as you told, that 26,000 crores per year or 400 rupees at one stage,
yes,
the increasing itself shows the seriousness, the need to get into the clean energy process. The very name indicates the clean energy cess. So it must be used for promoting the clean energy in the country.
Yes.
If that's probably the first is the existing generation process, which is mostly thermal in India, which is about 80%. That is bothering not only our country, the whole entire world. That's why probably this seriousness, this importance, the speed at which this was brought in, because the 400 rupees is not a small amount per ton of coal, and there was a lot of hue and cry with the producers as well as the consumers.
Yes.
But the government in its wisdom thought that this is the money required to be spent rightly to make the energy generation cleaner at least from today onwards. So, for that probably if I am right, the existing the generation process, the thermal, using coal, more of coal, how to make it cleaner.
Okay.
There are clean coal technologies. By adopting clean coal technology, the emissions can be reduced. That is the first area the money must go.
Yes.
The clean coal technology today, the powerhouses are about 30 years, 40 years old, emitting carbon dioxide. Now, how to reduce that? Probably the government is again probably is thinking of shutting down the old powerhouses, because there is no point in continuing repairing and retrofitting the old ones. So, let us go for the new ones instead of going and spending money and getting into the same.
Mr. Akla, I would want to ask you, the India's Clean Environment Fund, as clean as it acts as a carbon tax, but do you think that this tax at 400 rupees ton is a way too high, or do you think there should be some rationalization, or do you think it's okay? Because see, I have got some statistics with me here. If I take the total ex mine cost of coal, and we are talking of somewhere around 23% of the total ex mine cost is clean energy cess. So 23% is by no means a small sum.
See, it is at least almost 1.5 times more than the production cost itself.
1.5 times more
Because
than
in good efficient mines, open cast mines, especially in our country,
yes,
the cost of production is around 250 rupees only.
yes,
The pitted cost.
yes,
Now, if you are putting a cess of 400 rupees, which is to 1.5 times than the efficient mines,
yes,
not the average cost may be little more.
yes,
The underground mines, the cost may be more.
yes,
But those efficient open cast mines, which are producing coal at a rate of say 250 rupees per ton. Now, for them, if you are charging 400 rupees, but again I am telling, if this money is utilized for the purpose for which it has been brought in, I think there is a sense in it, because that the need of the hour is to make the energy generation clean, and the clean energy is tomorrow's requirement.
Okay.
I think 400 rupees, yes, it has to be utilized for the purpose for which it has been created.
So, Mr. Akla, what Mr. Akala suggested in effect, that though if you say the cost that is levied on the industry at 400 per ton is a bit too much, but if it is utilized in a manner which benefits the whole ecosystem as a large, it is good. I would like to take your comment, sir. If you could tell me, first of all, when at the forefront, when you see that the clean energy cess, which was doubled from 200 per metric ton to 400, would you see it as a bit steep, or do you also think it is justified if investments are made for improving the environment?
Well, I would like to look at it in a slightly different way. There are two issues in the whole subject, which I would think should be addressed. One is that whether this is very steep, as you said.
Yes.
And second issue which you raised right in the beginning is that should it be given to the state governments, part of it. As far as the first issue is concerned, whether it is steep, let me tell you one thing. The main producer of coal in the country is Coal India, which is the public sector, and all taxes, cesses, everything that is royalty, etc., added to the base cost, that is the cost of the run-of-mill coal, is really passed on to the consumer.
Yes.
It's not a tax on the miner. It's literally passed on. If you see in every item when the coal is given out, it's passed on to the end consumer. End consumer. From that point of view, if you say that you go on adding or increasing this cess, you are really taxing the end consumer, whether it's the consumer of steel.
Important, sir. I would like to interject at this point and would like to ask you, sir, in say power, you pass it on to the end consumer, but power has a domino effect, but because if the cost of power goes up, the industry as a large becomes incompetitive, because the cost of power to industry generally goes up in this country. So industry or maybe steel becomes incompetitive, or aluminium, or all those sectors.
This is a very, very important fact that you are saying, that if you pass on the cost, and power tariffs are so designed that any cost increase will hit the industry the maximum. And as you said that if you are not wanting the community or the industry to be non-competitive, then there are good reasons not to increase this cess very much.
Okay.
But I would look at it at a slightly different way also. Suppose you are having a cess like this, it's necessary that the cess, as Mr. Kala really said,
Yes.
put into a separate fund and not put into the consolidated fund of India, where it becomes another tax,
Yes.
and used for ways and means or funding many other schemes.
Yes.
But this is an exclusive fund which is exclusively used for a particular purpose.
Okay. So, as Mr. Parthi suggested, what actually happens is the clean energy cess at 400 per ton on coal, it also increases the cost of power on one hand. On the other hand, industries which are dependent on coal, say steel or aluminium or other industries, the cost of production goes up. So, we are no more competitive against China, or the cost of power for industry goes up because the coal as raw material is expensive. In effect, the competitiveness of the Indian industry is affected, and that itself is a big issue. I am going across to Mr. Akla at this point. Mr. Akla, how would you see this competitiveness of the Indian industry on one hand, on the other hand things like the clean energy fund? Is there a need to balance this both?
Of course, balancing is always required. See, probably the government, while deciding this 400 from 200, must have done the exercise as to where the fund go to, how it will be utilized. Probably if the backward calculation might have been done, which all the areas, what are the areas where we will utilize this fund, how much is required per year to improve, of course, the thermal power, clean coal technology side aspect, and then the new energy, that means our renewable energy, promoting or giving incentives to those, this thing, how much is required there, how much of incentives, how much of spending is to be done. Then based on that requirement, they should have gone for the deciding that this thing. Now, after having decided 400 rupees, now to think that as to where it will go and all these things, probably because having more money is also a problem. To manage the more funds is also a problem.
That's a very good point made by Mr. Akla, that gathering funds is another issue. But because Mr. Akla has raised this point, I quote an article that appeared in the Mint newspaper, and I'll read out verbatim from the article. Why the government is prompt in collecting such taxes, it seems to have a lackadaisical approach in utilizing them for stated goals. Substantial resources have been diverted from the NCEF, the National Clean Environment Fund, towards myriad government schemes, though it was originally instituted to fund research and development in the field of clean energy technologies. So, this article states that initially you had it for funding clean energy initiatives, but you divert it towards other government uses. I am going to Mr. Parthi. He has been a secretary in the Ministry of Coal and somebody who comes with an experience of sitting in the secretariat and deciding policy. Sir, when this happens, do you think the industry also feels that, okay, we gave it for some other purpose, but now it's been diverted elsewhere?
Well, I think the industry, by industry, I think anybody even within the government would feel that if the fund was meant to enhance the capabilities of clean energy in the country, whatever be the means, it should have been used there. The fact of the matter is that if you look back over the last several years, the utilization of this fund has been miserable and not been really done very well. There are areas now being thought of, particularly in case of renewable energies, there is some attempt. But what has been said in that article, I don't want to mention it, but yes, it has been diverted or plans to be diverted to certain popular schemes.
Yes.
Which to my mind would not be the correct step.
Okay.
And that would really give a lot of impetus to this demand which is coming up from the states on saying that let us share the cess. Now, let us look at that issue for the time being. Is it proper for this cess to be shared with the states?
Yes.
What is it actually meaning? If we are taxing the coal produced and then passing on that tax to some extent to the states, are we really saying that we will be encouraging the states to support more of coal mining?
Yes.
Indirectly, yes. But let us look at it globally. Are we looking at a situation where the states are not interested in encouraging clean coal technologies, but more interested in getting more money for their ways and means.
Yes.
I think these are working in cross purposes. We should, if you allow the states to get this money, then the state should also use it for the purpose it is meant for.
Okay.
That is, encourage research in their
Clean coal
areas
technologies.
for clean technology.
That's a very important coming from Mr. Parthi. I'm going to Mr. Akla. Sir, if you could tell me, you headed the Central Coalfields Limited as chairman and MD, and if you were to say give 400 rupees a ton as cess, and then that fund gets diverted not for clean coal and for other purposes, how would you feel?
I think it shouldn't have been done at all, because after all we are collecting the cess for clean energy purpose,
Yes.
and then to make India green.
Yes.
If you are using it elsewhere, I think it is not fair. I mean, probably.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, even now, after having done the exercise, should have been done. I think the government must have done exercise. Now, by implementing, by allocating and doing it, probably there may be slip here and there, but it has to be. It has to be.
Sir, there is one point that I want to make to you while you are saying this, because you said that you would not exactly be happy if as chairman of a company you gave cess for one purpose and it was used for the other. The article published in Mint says, consider this, in 2014 and 15, about half of the money disbursed from the fund was directed towards the National Ganga Mission. A detailed list of projects recommended for NCF funding available since 2011 shows that most of the money has been directed towards various government missions such as Green India Mission, the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission, installation of solar photovoltaic plants or solar water heater systems. So, a large part of the fund is also lying unutilized. Gyan Ranjan Panda, Assistant Professor of Economics at the Central University of Rajasthan, who co-authored a paper on the performance of National Clean Energy Fund in the Economic and Political Weekly, said the use of NCF money is to provide budgetary shortfall in any environment related program is defeating its original purpose. A very telling comment, which was to provide loans or viability gap funding for new renewable technologies. Sir, this article, if we go by this, clearly says that you collect fund for one purpose, spend it on some other, and this, does it defeat the intention of the government when such decisions are taken?
See, as you told, I have not even gone through that article. You are now coming to what you are reading.
Yes.
What I mean to say, the fund for which, the purpose for which it was collected,
Yes.
it should be, because after all it is a public money, and as Mr. Parthi has told, it is already taxing the industries, it is already taxing the common man, because anything increase in coal means the power, the industrial, all manufacturing sector also gets affected. So, it is going to be ultimately taxed and passed on to the common man. Now, the purpose for which, the purpose is very noble, the clean energy, the green India is very noble. I think it has to be utilized, and in my opinion there are only three ways of doing it. One is the clean coal technology.
Yes.
The pre-combustion, that is the coal itself must be made clean,
Yes.
by washing or whatever it is. Now, bring down the carbon, bring down the ash percentage in the coal,
Yes.
and that is pre-combustion. And then the combustion, like extra supercritical technologies, the clean coal technologies, and whatever incentive, whatever grants, whatever encouragement has to be given, you fund there, you pump the money there, and then the post-consumption, combustion. After you having burnt, if the carbon dioxide still goes up, you capture it, sequestrate it. There is a lot of technologies coming in the world, it is happening. Now, ultimately, if you don't aim for zero emission generation, I think this is the purpose for which.
Now we move towards a kind of situation where what we'll have is we'll put Mr. Akla with Mr. Parthi. Is there any question that you, sir, would like to ask Mr. Parthi? You served in a PS, you headed it, you headed the CMA PDI. Mr. Parthi has served in the Secretariat, designed policies or written down policies, formulated. Is there any question that you would like to ask him on this subject?
No, I think what is the process by which these cess either are decided? I mean, probably there must be an exercise. The purpose for which we are deciding to levy an exercise, they must have found what is required. Then only we go for the charging the cess or amount. Without going to that exercise, what is required every year, for example.
So you are asking why is it changed, on what basis? Mr. Parthi, would you like to answer?
You see, Mr. Agla is quite correct in saying that we must have some assessment as to what is the requirement of funds for this kind of activity. That is what he is saying. But I would like to add one thing to it is, we are entering into an area where we are talking of research and development.
Yes.
He talked about sequestration, carbon capture, sequestration. We are now adding a word utilization also. But there are many other areas also. Today people are talking of IGCC, where you are talking of the integrated coal carbon gas cycle. We are talking of coal conversions. We are talking of a methanol based economy. We are talking of various things which are coal based. And people are saying that if we do seriously think, maybe this coal which is available in large quantities in this country can be a game changer for the country as far as energy is concerned. I agree, but if you are entering into that area, there are many areas in that where you need R&D. We don't have all the answers as yet. It is very difficult to put a cap on the kind of funds that we maybe there is an assessment made as to what we need today, but it will go on expanding. It will go on provided we are able to get into this mode of research. Unfortunately, what is happening in this area is, while there are plenty of institutes, plenty of industries involved in this kind of activity in trying to see how coal can be better used, but there is no attempt, or there is not been any serious input into the actual use in the commercial use in the industry in these areas.
Yes.
We started with the idea of having one or two plants for conversion from coal to liquid.
Yes.
But that has been abandoned.
Mr. Parthi, while you are making this point, the point that we started with of states demanding a share,
okay.
I would like to ask you a question pointing towards the fact that when, sir, the funds are diverted, for example, under the CAMPA or the compulsory afforestation project,
yes.
24,000 crore was collected, and the former environment minister Prakash Javadekar said that less than 5% was given to the states. So do you think that the states feel that because anyways the money is not used for the intended purpose, it is better we also get a share, because we anyways have to spend on development works in the state? Do you think the states are right in demanding a share when such huge amounts are being collected by the center?
At the present, I would go along and say, to some extent, that demand is quite legitimate.
Yes.
Because if you collect huge sums and you wish to use it for a particular purpose,
yes,
and don't use it, you are basically putting it into the consolidated fund and maybe using it for something else.
yes,
In that case, the states say that might as well give it to me. I would like to develop those areas which are getting affected because of coal.
yes,
And whether you like it or you don't, the more polluting areas will come around the coal mines, because that is more easier to use. People don't, it's better to use coal right near the mine.
You are justifying that state is valid in
there to some extent, yes, but
yes.
the point is that if this is not a general tax which is
yes,
taking,
this is extraordinary.
It's an extraordinary tax, and it should be used for extraordinary purposes.
Okay, that's an important point. I am going across to Mr. Akla. Sir, you headed the central coal fields, and your coal fields were spread across states. Now, if such a demand is made by a certain coal producing state to the center, what input would you give to the center? Imagine, I mean, as somebody who chaired the company, if this demand is made by a certain state in which your coal mine operates, what request or what suggestion would you give to the center?
See, as again in the beginning itself I told,
yes,
the cess is collected for clean energy and green technology.
yes,
Now, if the states are able to, if they are in a position to pursue this mission
yes,
of clean energy, yes, they can come in, and then they have to come out with proposals, I think, then only.
yes,
Because otherwise, as I find, it is the carbon reduction of carbon emissions.
yes,
This is the first thing. Probably the money should go into that area. Carbon emissions reduction, number one. Number two, renewable or new energy, intensifying and motivating that areas. Maximum third, the afforestation.
okay,
These three.
Okay.
Only in afforestation I am finding
Okay.
the states are playing a major role.
Okay.
So to that extent, if they are coming out with the specific plans,
Then they should
I
be
think
given.
they should. They
Okay.
should.
So Mr. Akla also concedes that they should be given. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on today's discussion. So as we see, there are 3 points that came out of the discussion. First, that the cess on coal is so high that it is more than the cost of production of coal at 400 a ton. 2, it also affects the competitiveness of Indian industry, making power more expensive for the industry, and as the raw material cost, which is coal, as a raw material becomes expensive, so the competitiveness of Indian industries with other nations like China also goes for a toss. But having said that, it is necessary to promote clean coal and clean technologies, but the government must spend the money for the intended purpose. And also the general consensus with both Mr. Parthi and Mr. Akla, who agreed that the states have a right in demanding a share in the coal cess. We'll track this issue for you and as it develops on News World India. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on today's discussion on current issues. Thank you.